Hello and welcome everyone. Today my guests are Don Casey, founder and president of Tesla Owners Ireland, and Tom McEnaney, founder of the IODP charity, the International Orphanage Development Programme, and also Tesla owner. You all returned from Poland recently with 72 Ukrainian refugees and their pets, and soon you will be going back again. First off, how did this all come about?
Like many people, I was watching TV. I was watching the refugee situation, and I was frustrated. There was something. There was nothing I could do, and I had the idea that I'd like to get into my car, go over to Poland, to pick up refugees, and bring them back. Of course, straight away knew it was a bad idea, but then thought it might be a good idea if I could do it on scale. So I went to the Tesla owners group because, hey, it's my tribe. And I thought there was a lot of there are a lot of reasons why a set of Teslas might be interested in going over. I rang up John and said, "Would you be interested? Would the Tesla owners group be interested?" And I think John took all of about a minute and a half to think about it and said yes. And then put it to the group, and we had 10 people. We had a convoy.
Did you have any specific number in mind for the trip?
No, but I suppose we're a little bit limited by the number of cars that can charge at supercharger station at one time, depending on the station. So you wouldn't want to be going there with a super large trip, but we didn't have any number. We just put it out, and when we got supplemented, in the end we had 10 people who came back to us and said they'd love to come, which was great. Model S's, Model 3s, and Model X's. Of differing ages. I think I ended up having the oldest car there. So then we decided, once we had that group, there was no reason, once friends and family wanted to get involved, that they couldn't get involved. So we let, dare I say it, ordinary cars, ICE cars, into the mix as well. And so now we had 15 cars, 5 ICE cars and 10 Teslas. And then the night before we were going, we were all on a Zoom. I remember having to pulling over at the side of the road. I was eventually managing to get to wash my car before heading off on the ferry at 7 o'clock the next morning. And so I pulled over to the car wash, and we were on a Zoom. And Caroline Dowling, who's the third member of our group, she's also a member of the committee of the Tesla owners group, and is a director of a number of Irish companies, including CRH and UNICEF. Caroline had been was in Poland, was in Poznan, engaging with refugees, and she said, "Lads, they have loads of luggage. They're bringing everything they own. Some of them only have a bag, some of them have a few plastic bags, some of them have a large amount of luggage, and there's no way you're going to fit 4 people in the car with 4 sets of luggage. We need a van." And so I rang up my brother-in-law and said, "We need you to come, and you've got 5 minutes to make up your mind." And 5 minutes later, he said, "I'm coming." And I said, "Great, now you've got 10 minutes to get us a van." And 10 minutes later, he said, "Right, your brother is giving me a van." So then we became 10 Teslas, 5 ICE cars, and a van.
And how did you plan the trip? And did everything go according to your plan?
Okay, well, I guess the Tesla vehicles and their in-car navigation system was a significant assistance in terms of planning, because you can place in Poznan into the sat nav, and it will tell you on all the number of supercharger stops, the percentage battery when you get to each supercharger, and the length of time you have to stay at each supercharger. And I can tell you, I have the smallest range of the cars, the Tesla cars that went. So I did the planning based on my estimates, which turned out okay. We put together the route across with a ferry crossing across the UK and the Channel Tunnel, which proved to be very efficient at bringing the cars across from England to France. And we then base our stops, our overnight stops, on the availability of superchargers locally. So we headed across in 2 days. So we started off on the 7:30 a.m. ferry from Dublin to Holyhead, drove across Wales and England within the day, boarded the Eurotunnel through to France, and our first night on Thursday night was in Belgium, which was a significant amount of miles, but it paled into insignificance compared to the following day when we drove from Belgium through to the Netherlands and across France and into Poland, which was a fairly savage amount of driving. We arrived to Poland late on Friday night, and we had based our pickup and our overnight stay very close to the supercharger in Poznan. And then our plan was to drive back to Cherbourg port, arriving there on Sunday afternoon. Now, it's fair to say we learned a lot of lessons from our journey back, as much as we learned from our journey over. Because on our journey back, our mileage was determined by our precious cargoes and, as previously mentioned, all our luggage. It did have some impact, Inga, on the range. You know, it added additional weight to the car. And in fact, when I journeyed from Berlin to Poznan, I arrived with probably 15% battery. When I journeyed back from Poznan back to Berlin, under the same circumstances, I arrived with virtually zero battery. I had 5 kilometers to spare on the journey back into Berlin. But it's fair to say the infrastructure after Berlin across through continental Europe was excellent in terms of the ability of the cars to stop, charge, and keep going. We've spent maybe 35 to 45 minutes at superchargers for the rest of the journey. But I guess the logistic bit that we learned from was that we had a large number, as I say, 72 refugees with us on the journey back from Poznan, and just mobilizing them from the overnight stay we had and getting to Cherbourg in time for the ferry proved to be a challenge which unfortunately we didn't make. We were 45 minutes with the last car to the ferry, but we have absolute gratitude for Irish ferries who delayed the ferry crossing to accommodate our precious cargo and our convoy. And so we all arrived back to Ireland and to Dublin in the one ferry crossing.
It's a drama.
Any reason you didn't go back the same way you came through the UK?
The requirement for Ukrainians to have visas to traverse through the UK. So that was the principal reason we didn't arrange that. It would just have been a nightmare to try and arrange that.
UK is the only country in Europe that I know of, and not the EU, but sorry, in Europe, that is virtually closed to Ukrainian refugees.
And how did you get in touch with the refugees in Poland?
So actually, this is one of the hardest things that we did. A number of Irish groups have gone over with buses, some with money for plane tickets in their back pocket. We weren't the first group that went over. We were the largest in terms of number of refugees that we brought back. We brought back 94 in total, 72 by car and another 22 by plane. And we were the only actual group that went over and came back with we're not undersubscribed. You know, we were actually oversubscribed. Most of the other buses, all the other bus groups that went over, came back to Ireland with a lot of empty seats. So we went to, first of all, the Ukrainian Crisis Center, and we said, we want to do this, will you help us? And they said, whatever you need. And so we said, well, can you go to the embassy and give us accreditation? So they applied for the embassy. The embassy took a little while, but the embassy gave us accreditation. Now this, I should say, is after talking to a whole load of people about how do we do this, and speaking to people who'd been out before and had come back with no refugees, as to, in terms of learning from their mistakes. And then once we had proper accreditation, we were able to engage, and by we I mean Caroline, was able to engage with the refugee centre in Poznan and say, look, here's our bona fides. You know, we're endorsed entirely by the embassy, which had every name and every car registration number on the letter of endorsement. Will you now engage with us? And they said, sure, of course, we will now engage with you. So they started to put together people. Now, I should say, we had only a relatively small number of people from the refugee centre. Ireland is not a normal country of choice for people coming out of Ukraine. Many people think it's part of the UK and therefore think it's closed off. Those people have never heard of us before, which is a blow to my national pride. But there you go, you take these things. But what we also did was we worked with the Ukrainian Crisis Centre. They put it out on a whole load of Facebook groups. That there was this convoy, and if you could get in touch with them, they'd be happy to bring you to Ireland. And so we had people contacting us from all over Ukraine, from Mariupol, from Odessa, from Kiev, saying, can we join you? And we said, sure, just get to the border. Get to the border with Poland, whatever way you can, and then we'll send taxis. Caroline had 2 Ukrainian speakers with her in Poland. And they were coordinating taxis. We'll send taxis, we'll take you to Poznan, we'll put you up in a hotel. Doesn't matter if you have pets, we can take pets. We'll take you the next day. And we had roughly, I suppose, 2 groups of people, very desperate group of people who couldn't afford flights. And then others who perhaps could, but had pets. We had, I think it was 5 cats, 3 dogs and a rat. But people who loved their pets so much that they couldn't leave them behind and they couldn't bring them on a flight. So we ended up having those as well. And I have to say, Inga, the one thing that was strange about this, and although our experience is no different to the experience of all the other groups that have gone over, is because these are very, very scared and often, most times, traumatized people, they find it very difficult to make decisions. So even in the 24 hours before we were heading back from Poland, the numbers were seesawing. At one stage, it looked like we had fewer than 50 people coming back with us. So we'd have over 20 spaces empty, which would be a disaster for us. And then at another stage, we had over 100, and we were going, how are we going to find? Well, we had a quick conflab, and we said, right, nobody gets left behind. Doesn't matter how many people register, we're getting them to Ireland. We'll fit as many as we can into the cars. The van has a couple of seats, we'll fit a couple into the van, and then the rest we put on flights. So nobody was getting left behind. But the numbers just seesawed. Every hour there was a different number, until finally we had the number of 94.
For many of the refugees, it was probably their first time in an electric vehicle. Did they make any comments about Teslas or electric vehicles in general?
Well, they were probably the easiest travelers, Inga. They were so grateful for their passage away from the war zone. They had no problem. They understood the concept of charging stops and taking a break, and it was probably, you know, it was a nice break considering it was a long journey back over. So from that point of view, no major issues in that respect. Tom?
No, I would say, well, for a lot of these, first of all, Inga, it wasn't just the first time in an EV, it was the first time out of Ukraine. I don't think it was an issue for them. I think, as I say, these were people who were traumatized. Most of them stayed very quiet in the back of the car. Some of us tried playing Ukrainian songs and Irish songs, and we had interpreters who could be available on voice on the hands-free, you know, for us to chat to them. But for the most part, stayed very quiet. One of the odd things we found was they stayed very, a lot of them just didn't eat, you know, and whether that was trauma or whether they just got used to not having food because I didn't have access to it, I don't know, but other than the kids, a lot of them didn't eat. One woman, when she got into the car, just cried for an hour because she was convinced that she'd actually fell in with traffickers, which are actually a huge thing. There's a number of traffickers, sex traffickers, child traffickers, who are taking advantage of the situation in Poland in order to take women and children. I'll tell you one thing though about the EVs and the refugees and where they come together, and it's a strange thing. I can't figure it out, and if anybody else has any ideas they can figure out, that'd be great. I was stopped at a supercharger in the west of Poland. Please don't ask me the name. Even if I could remember it, I'm sure I could, or sorry, west of Berlin. Even if I could remember the name, I probably couldn't pronounce it. And I found these Teslas with Ukrainian flags in them, and I'm going, wait a second. I'm sure mine was a completely unique and original idea. And I went over to them. I said, "What are you lads up to?" And they said, "Oh, we're coming from Holland. We're a convoy of Teslas. We're going to Poland to pick up refugees and bring them back to Holland." I was going, "Oh, that's great!" And there was loads of handshaking and taking photographs in front of the cars and swapping stories and all this kind of crack. And it was fine. And I was driving along, and a couple of hours later, in another place that I can't remember and also probably couldn't pronounce, to the east of Berlin. Now this time it's dark, and I saw there was I stopped at the supercharger, and there was a Tesla, and this one had Spanish plates, and it had a Ukrainian flag on the side of it. And I went, no. And I went over to your man and I said, "Listen, by any chance," I know this is a strange question, "by any chance are you going to Poland?" He said, "Yeah, I'm part of a convoy. There's 17 of us. We've just come from Spain. We've gone into Poland and we've collected refugees." So we had an Irish convoy, a Spanish convoy, and a Dutch convoy, and we heard about a Norwegian convoy, all of Teslas, all collecting refugees at the same time. Now you explain to me why that is, and I promise to put you on my Christmas card list, because I haven't been able to figure it out.
Did you have flags as well?
We did, although John refused to put his up. He had a decal on the side of the car. When I was putting mine up, John was saying, "That's going to cause drag. You know how many kilometers of range you're going to lose by putting that flag on your car?" And I was standing there and I was looking at my Ukrainian flag and I was saying, "That's fine. If I lose a couple of kilometers of range, at least I'll have a Ukrainian flag on one side of my car and an Irish flag on the other side of my car. And it's fine, you know." But yeah, we had flags and we had decals. And let's just say that people knew where we were from and what we were about.
I guess the Poznan supercharger was a 6-stall charger, and just to I suppose to add to Tom's story, at one stage when we were there, we looked at the supercharger, and there was 6 Teslas parked there, each of them a different nationality of Europe.
How long did you actually stay in Poznan?
Oh, well, some of us stayed very little because they arrived very late, and it was a very early departure the next morning.
I got in at 3:30 in the morning and had to be up at 5:30 to leave at 6:30. And I left at 6:30, right? I managed to make it. It's okay, it's 2 hours sleep. I can manage on 2 hours sleep. It's fine. Yeah, sure, I'm going to be doing 16 hours driving, but I can manage on 2 hours sleep. I left, I drove off, and I realized something I'd never come across before, because I'd never been at a full supercharger station in my life. So I never knew that when a supercharger station is full, they only charge you up to 80% unless you override it. Sure, I didn't know that. And even though I had the president of the Tesla Owners Club with me, you think he'd tell me? You think he'd say, "By the way, come here, let me give you a word to the wise"? Oh, no. So I was driving down the road, you know, and it was only as I was driving the road, and it was telling me to go, my car was telling me to go back. I'm going, wait a second, why is my car telling me to go back? It's telling me to go back because I don't have enough bloody range to make it to the next charging point, because it's only charged up to 80%. And I had to turn around and go back. I could have had an extra hour's sleep. But I learned something about superchargers. And so, you know.
I know that you, John, have a Tesla Model S 75. What do you drive, Tom?
Tesla Model S 85.
85, okay.
85D.
Okay. So you should have better range than John.
I should have well, you know what it is, and I think this is I should have. I'm a little bit older. And it's possible because I was always at the back of the queue. I have to say, Inga. Okay, hands up. I was always the one at the very, very end trying to catch up, and it's not because I'm afraid of driving quickly. And I suspect it's because I may not be as good a driver. I might not be managing. I rarely use the autopilot because at speed I don't like to use autopilot. So I rarely used it. And I suspect John is a regular user of autopilot. And it's another thing. If you use autopilot, I tend to only engage autopilot when I'm not doing speed and when I really, really need to save battery, because it's much, much easier on the battery. The car drives itself much better than I do, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Can I throw in, is this the time to say, what did we learn, John? Apart from don't trust the president of the Tesla Owners Club to tell you about the 80% rule, one of the things I learned, just from a purely EV point of view, was that when you have an older battery, it takes longer to charge. So you'll be sitting beside somebody else and they've got a newer car, and they've got a much newer technology and a newer battery, and so they'll be stopped for much shorter than you are before they head on again. And that was something I hadn't really realized, because I'd never done any. I've driven across Europe in the Tesla before, but it wasn't time critical. It was on holidays, so you didn't really care. You didn't notice. You weren't looking at your watch going, I've got a ferry to make and I've only got 4 hours to make it. And, should I be going up to 160 kilometers an hour, or will I just hold it steady at 150? You're not making those kind of decisions. But in this one, where time was absolutely critical, I learned that it actually does make a big difference. I suspect John and many of the others were using Autobahn.
Yes. So I have, as I think you have as well, Inge, what's called enhanced autopilot.
Yes.
And enhanced autopilot takes the off ramp when you are to exit a motorway. But not only does it take the off ramp, if the off ramp then subdivides into whatever, a north route or a south route or whatever, it will also then position the car into that branch of the off ramp for you. That I found to be absolutely invaluable. I didn't realize the benefit of that until I traveled across Germany and France and the motorway network there. That meant you could concentrate on driving. It positioned you on all of these spaghetti junctions when you were exiting motorways to find superchargers or exiting motorways to go on to other motorways. It was significant in terms of that, and an absolute godsend, I must say. The other thing I found was that the Autobahns in Germany are completely unlimited speed, as you know, for some of the Autobahns in good weather. And the actual predictor of what your percentage battery will be at your destination actually does take that into account. It takes into account that you would drive at the top autopilot limit, which is 150 kilometers per hour. So you actually, whilst you were driving quite hard, your predicted range was actually turning out as what you expected it to be in the guessometer.
I was just going to say, everybody who didn't have enhanced autopilot got lost at least 2 or 3 times on each leg, and that adds considerably to your time. And also, and there's roadworks, and you're at one of those. We were at one in Belgium, I think it was, where it was a complete spaghetti junction. I mean, really, some drunken civil engineer decided to completely take the mickey with this one, and then they had roadworks on it, which meant that all the directions were completely changed. And I think I lost an hour, myself and another car, the car that I was following. We lost an hour on that one. Had we had enhanced autopilot, that would have been 1 extra hour's sleep.
And what was consumption like on the Autobahn?
I average around 260 watt hours per kilometer. I drove 3,700 kilometers. I consumed 1 megawatt hour or 1,000 units of electricity during the course of the trip.
I haven't got a clue what I consumed. I have no idea how many miles I did. And yeah, I've no idea what my efficiency was like. I was just focused on staying in the middle of the road and trying my best not to fall asleep.
And I can tell you that the top speed that I attained on the unlimited speed sections of the German Autobahn was 205 kilometers an hour. That was just because I was coming up to a bend. I came off the pedal. My colleague driving a standard range Model 3 managed to get 225 kilometers an hour out of his before, again, he was constrained by some traffic on the unlimited speed Autobahn. So from that point of view, that's the stats around what we achieved in our EVs.
So all the cars performed flawlessly during the whole trip.
Yeah, absolutely flawlessly. All the cars, in fair to say, the ICE cars also all managed to journey without any major hiccups in terms of the mechanicals in the car.
Now let's talk a little bit about your upcoming trip. When are you going?
So the plan for Mission Impossible 2 at this point in time, and things are still being planned, so you can appreciate it may change slightly, is to depart on Thursday the 5th of May and do that same 2-day journey across to Poznan and come back into Ireland on Monday the 9th of May. We have more Teslas this time than before. So it would appear as if we're up to possibly 19 or 20 Teslas on our convoy this time. But we are going a slightly different route if they come to fruition, which will mean that one of our overnight crossings is a ferry taking us from Harwich to Hook of Holland. So it means that we can sleep while we're on the move, and our journey will be shorter as a result from Hook of Holland over to Poznan. Now, that's the tentative plan at the moment. Hopefully, it'll all come to fruition.
I can't believe we're going to be doing a trip where I actually get some sleep. It'll feel like a holiday.
Do you have any places left if anyone else wants to join?
At this point, we believe we're probably at capacity in respect of superchargers along the route, because we, on the last journey, sort of buddied up with standard range vehicles and long range vehicles. And at one stage, I was at a supercharger and there was 4 other Irish Teslas all also charging at the supercharger. So I think we're more or less hitting the full capacity in terms of the convoy at this stage.
Tom, you have raised over 26,000 euros so far on GoFundMe. Is this enough to cover both trips?
No, no, it's not, because we have to pay for the hotels for the refugees when they arrive. It's not like it's we have some just-in-time logistics solution. I mean, refugees will arrive whenever refugees arrive, and you can't ask them to sleep on the street. If you've agreed to take them to Ireland, they have to have somewhere to stay. And as you can imagine, all accommodation or much of the accommodation in Poland is booked up. So that's the one thing. The ferries will cost us money, and just bringing when we bring them back, we can't ask the refugees to stay up all night, so we have to put them up somewhere. So it's expensive, and I'd say the first one, even though we got a lot for free, the first one cost us over 20,000. So we have a little bit left, but we're going to have to do some significant fundraising if we're to do the next one, you know. And and one of the focuses of the next one is to try to reunite families. So there's quite a few people who are refugees who are in Ireland, who had to leave brothers and sisters and daughters back in Ukraine for different reasons, and we're trying to bring those together. In fact, we brought one together in the last few days. We actually bought them a plane ticket, but yeah. So it's I think it's an especially important trip at a time when all the flights are booked up. So for many people, it'll be their only way of getting to Ireland, their only way of getting somewhere that doesn't involve that's not just sleeping on the street. But we do need to raise money. So, I mean, we'll do it anyway. It'll happen. But yes, funding is going to be critical for us.
So is there anything else you would like to add?
I guess, like, driving electric is something which is also a learned activity. So our Angel Caroline, who traveled over to Poznan, of us, very kindly donated her Tesla Model X to a novice. And he won't mind me saying so, but it took him the 4 days to get used to it driving across Europe, which was probably not the best time for him to be driving an EV for the first time. It does take a little bit of getting used to, and I think it took him a few days to learn how to get used to it, how to arrive, how to conserve battery, how to charge up fully, or how to charge up to whatever it needed to be charged up to get to the next stop.
And he had 7 people in his car, so he was doing all of this while he had while being responsible for 7 refugees. Yeah, no pressure, you know, while doing 150 kilometers an hour down the Autobahn. No pressure at all.
That was super interesting. I hope you have a safe and successful trip. And to our viewers, please donate generously. And thanks for watching.